You really have to understand what's going on in your market certain times of the year. Let's talk about the money part, and then we'll talk about other things. When people aren't coming to you, you have to go to the people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the FIP Printing Pros podcast. I am your host, Josh Steinison. With me, I got my co-host, Chris Lockwood. And today what we're going to be talking about is how to prepare for a slower sales cycle in your business. To kind of start that off, basically, we'll talk about is, I guess for our industry and specifically our company, is what I have to deal with every year is we always have a slow period, usually during the summertime. Around here, obviously, we got all the snowbirds that, they go back home because it's now cooled off from the winter time. And so and plus it gets really hot here. So they usually leave around May-ish to September-ish. So those months in between there, we always kind of have to sometimes plan, especially the big ones like July and August always seem to be our slowest months. So we always have to kind of plan for that financially, the good months while all the snowbirds are here, we're able to hold enough money in the account to kind of able to last some down months if we have to. Yeah. So things like that, that's kind of just the start of one of the big reasons why is obviously because you have your bills you have to pay and things like that, and you got to make sure that you're accounting for that coming up.
So you say it's when the snowbirds leave. Why in the print industry? Why do you think that is? That having those people leave and go north is what causes the slower months?
Well, because all the businesses here are losing all those customers. Yeah. So they're also having a downtime at that kind of period of time. Plus, also with how hot it is, a lot of people aren't doing as many events outside.
Like outdoor events, yeah.
They still are because it's summertime, so they do it. But I think around here, most of our events they're trying to knock out in the nicer months. Yeah. They still do the summer ones just because everybody's out of school and different holidays like 4th of July and things like that happen during those time frames that they're doing things. But I would say that they definitely probably don't do as many, in my opinion. Let's just say World Equestrian Center here, for instance. They a lot of times their winter is their biggest time. Winter for Florida.
Yeah. For everyone else, that's like 70 degrees, 75 on a cold day.
Yeah, sometimes it gets down to
50s. There's 3 days in February where it's like 50 degrees.
But I mean, for them, like that's a big draw here too. Is World Equestrian Center for the city and everything like that, and what kind of money that brings in to the community. And when their big cycle is done, you also have to think there's horses. So like being in the dead heat of the summer, they don't do as much for that, or at least long duration, even for that matter, if they do it. So they always have to have that factor too, where you got all these other companies that are, the event companies that maybe aren't bringing the draw because they're outdoor stuff that would normally be in. They don't do as much during the hot summers. Yeah,
that's interesting because I think it is industry specific as to when things are popular, when they're not. Because I have an Airbnb up in Tennessee, and the summer months are huge.
Yeah,
like it's hugely popular in the mountains. But the winter months, especially right after Christmas, like Christmas is big, but like January, February, it's like almost dead.
Yeah.
But now everybody's back to work. There's nobody vacationing. May is our worst month because it's right at the end of school. Nobody's going on vacation. You got graduation. So there's all these other things going on, which pulls people away from that. So, to be able to say that we know that, like you said, we're able to plan for that. So I think depending on the industry that you're in, you really have to understand what's going on in your market certain times of the year, so that you plan to, like, I didn't even think about like what you said with it being hot, snowbirds. I was thinking in my head, I'm like, snowbirds don't buy a bunch of promo items. What the hell? But
they buy things from other businesses who buy from us.
right, exactly. So that's who gets served these,
Yep.
things, and when they're gone. So, matter of fact, I was having a conversation with someone this past weekend, and they want to put on an event, and they were like, when do you think we should do it? And I'm like, well, not when you're saying you were talking about the middle of July, and it's like 1,000,000 degrees outside, and this is going to be an outdoor event. Like, how about we do it in even September here is too hot.
Yeah.
I'm like, how about October? We're gonna want to wait that long. So, but yeah, that all those things play a factor. So you're prepping for those months. Sales are going to be down. Still got to make payroll. Still got to pay bills. What do you like? Is there a percentage? Is there an amount you want to have in the bank? Let's talk about the money part, and then we'll talk about other things that you do or can be done to offset that business. So what do you like to have in the bank prepping for those months?
Basically, you got to kind of know your burn rate and things that you go through. What your monthly burn rate is to.
Explain that. What the burn rate is.
Burn rate is basically no matter what's coming through. Like I guess I'm drawing a blank what the technical word is for it, but your I know this word, but I'm blanking today. But like your reoccurring cost within the business,
your fixed
overhead.
Yeah, your overhead.
Yeah, all your overhead. So like if you have business loans for like us, we bought an existing business, so we have business loans that we have to pay off, and then as well as we bought our warehouse. So you got a loan for the building and the land. So you got two loans right there, which for us is a big one because we have a 10,000 square foot warehouse. Plus, it was a decent business that we purchased. So plus equipment, loans, things like that you have to make a business run. So you got a lot of reoccurring stuff that you got to pay monthly right there. Then you got your payroll, which if you have the type of business where you could just call people in and when you're busy, and then but. Most businesses don't work like that. You have full time.
It's hard to keep employees when you don't know if they're working.
Yeah, exactly. So most people have full-time employees, so you got to always factor that in. You got that constantly always have to pay. Then you got your electricity. There's so many other things that come into play, even like within a business, softwares and subscriptions, memberships, and things like that are always monthly things that you have to pay. So that's basically burn rate. All those things that are always reoccurring no matter what. You have cost of goods, which is if you need to place an order, then you pay the cost of goods to your vendor that you order. That's depending on how much sales are coming through. So that's going to change every month. But I'm talking that always, no matter what, every single month you have to pay this amount. That's what I mean by that.
So what would you recommend to people? Like, how many months of that would you want to have? Like, if no income come in, but you knew things were going to turn around at X time, like how many months would you want to have as a?
You want to have a more and as much of a cushion as you can, but I would say at the minimum 3 to 6 months is a good number to make sure you can stay afloat. Also, another thing I always recommend too is have a line of credit as a backup too. Unfortunately, I've had to dig into that before. And it's honestly saved. I could have did a lot more. I wouldn't say save the business necessarily because I could have laid people off and things like that. But also, I have good employees. I don't want to lay them off. I want to eventually get back to where things need to be, and then that way I can keep them on and we can keep going. If you've listened to the podcast, my struggle was we got hit with inflation. I had a variable loan and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that was a whole different scenario than what a normal person might have to deal with. But even if it was, say, that line of credit was utilized for just because of the down months, some people do that. So let's say I plan for 3 to 6 months and we're coming into May. And we're already into August, and unfortunately had 3 to 4 straight months of, bad months. I've already ate up all that savings I had. Now I have another bad month in September. Well, now I've got to rely on my line of credit. And then I come back to October. Now we're rebuilding back up the account. So, obviously that's not the goal.
That's definitely not.
That's not the goal, because the goal is, you build out a sales force and a reoccurring machine that you're able to, and that's what we're working on even right now. We're trying to get to the point where there aren't down months, and we don't have to worry about that. But it is a realistic thing in most businesses where you have down months because it's just off season for whatever your industry is or whatever the case may be, and you always have to kind of take that into account.
Yeah, I always think about, the next thing we want to move to is like, what are the things you do in preparation for, like, I always think about like people that are in lawn care service, right? So, during the spring, summer, and fall, especially in Florida, like you're busy, like they're constantly, the grass is always growing, right? Yep. So, but you still, you don't want to lay people off, like you said, in the winter months. And down here, there's no snow removal. I mean, if you're up north, you've got a 12-month cycle. You're either mowing grass or you're shoveling snow. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important for business owners to, figure out what can I shift in my business in order to maintain my income. And I might not be mowing the grass once a week in the winter months, but like down here, that's the perfect time to trim trees. That's the perfect time to clean out gutters. That's the perfect time to, update landscaping as far as not the plants and stuff like that, which it could be. You take out the summer plants, you put in the winter plants, but it's also, is it better to, maybe don't do the mulch in the summer. Maybe you do it in the winter months so that now my landscaping looks good all winter long. But so in the print industry, you already mentioned we're working out, building out the sales team. We're getting more focused on those kind of things. What else could we do, or would you recommend that a business does when you're coming up on those slow months? And obviously people don't wait until you're in the slow months to figure this shit out. Do it beforehand.
Yeah. So you mentioned landscapers and mowing company, things like that. What they actually do, if they're smart, not all of them maybe do it because they're still learning how it works in the downtime and then dealing with the stress of how to get through those and, like you said, doing different type of odd jobs to make it work during the winter months. But our guy, what he does for the business and things like that, and he mows, he charges us a monthly fee the entire year. So it's a flat rate every month he's going to be getting, no matter, and he accounts basically, he knows like, okay, it's going to be during the busy times, it's going to be every week I got to be there doing something. And then in the winter months, it's only going to be one or two times, a month. Yeah. So what he does is basically averages that over the year, and then that's your monthly fee. And so then he got that. He's got a monthly.
So that helps you as a business owner. You don't have these big $1,500 a month payments in the spring and summer.
Yeah.
You just pay $800. I'm just making up numbers here. $800 a month, so it spreads it out. That's pretty smart. That's good. Yeah.
So it's also I kind of think of it even from like a teacher standpoint, where they allow you, because they're off during the summer, you can get a larger salary during the year.
Yep.
Or you could get a spread out across all 12 months, yep, even during the summer break when you're not even working. So it's kind of similar model, I guess, in that regard. Now that can't work in every industry maybe, because some of that, like us, is you buy what you need at the time you need it, yep, type of thing. So every industry would have to figure out how that could work for them, and that's what we're even trying to do right now. Is how we go about that, how we can combat that too is now we're trying to expand just beyond our area right now, which our industry we can. So trying to expand from the areas. So like right now, summer for here isn't necessarily ideal because Florida, it's how hot it gets, but we can target other areas that maybe are thriving during the summer because it's a little cooler or at least decent, normal temperatures for a summer. And that's kind of what we're looking at trying to start to do is look into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's really, really smart. And like for us, with the Airbnb, what we do in those off months is we offer massive discounts.
Yeah.
So we're not making as much money, but at least we're not coming out of pocket to pay, to pay the mortgage and pay the bills and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's also, depending on the industry, again, adding different services. You could also anticipate, with the products based on the time of year. When you're coming up on Memorial Day, 4th of July, that little stretch, that's a big time patriotic time. Like I do woodworking on the side, and from January till about around the end of March, middle of April, I was building planter boxes because everyone's getting ready to plant their garden and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't build one now. I couldn't sell one now.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't make sense. So you also, when you're looking at those slow months, I would say probably look at what you're offering at the time, because it might not make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to come out and clean a swimming pool once a week in January, but like you said, in July you're going to be out there doing it, every single week. So,
yeah.